My name is Bridget Wilson, and I'm 29. People who meet me now assume I've always been composed, the kind of woman who can walk into a room full of investors, smile once, and somehow make them trust her with six-figure decisions. They don't picture the girl I used to be, barefoot on cracked trailer steps in rural Oklahoma, listening to my parents argue about overdue bills like it was weather. You grow up like that, you learn two things fast. First, money doesn't just buy comfort, it buys oxygen. Second, the moment you finally get that oxygen, the people who used to watch you choke start asking you to share your air. I work in commercial real estate. I started as an agent right out of college, making basically nothing, living on caffeine and stubbornness. But I'm good with people, and I understand numbers in a way that makes them feel less like math and more like truth. I worked my way up deal by deal, awkward handshake by awkward handshake, until I finally hit something I never thought I'd see: stability. By the time this story begins, I was making about $127,000 a year. Not private jet money, but for someone who grew up eating government cheese and pretending it was normal, it felt like winning a war. My boyfriend, Colin, was 26. We'd been together 3.5 years, and we'd been living together for the last 8 months in a decent 2-bedroom apartment that cost $1,450 a month. Colin worked as a marketing coordinator, making around $38,000 a year. We split expenses in a way that made sense. I covered about 65%, he covered the rest. I didn't resent it. I loved him. And honestly, I thought we were building something mature, something that didn't have to be loud to be real. That was the first thing I got wrong. Because to me, our relationship felt like peace. To him, it started to feel like a cage. And before I even realized he was restless, other people were already whispering into his ear that comfort was dangerous. The part of the story I have to explain, because it matters later, is my family. My parents, Linda and Mike, still live in the same trailer park where I grew up. My mom cleans houses. My dad does odd jobs when he feels like it, which is his way of saying he doesn't like being told what to do. And my sister Brittany never finished high school. She has 3 kids with 3 different fathers, and a talent for making every crisis sound like it might kill her unless I fix it. When I started making decent money, my family's attitude toward me shifted overnight. Suddenly, I was their favorite daughter, their miracle, their pride. But only when they needed something. Every phone call eventually turned into a hint, a sob story, you know we're struggling, a broken fridge, an overdue bill, a school fundraiser, little Aiden needing shoes, Brittany's car payment just this once. It was exhausting being treated like a human ATM with legs. And then I started dating Colin. At first, my family pretended to be happy for me because he was kind, charming, easy to be around. But the real reason they loved him? Colin's parents owned a successful dental practice. His family had money, connections, and a lifestyle my relatives liked to imagine they could borrow if they stayed close enough to it. My mom would ask, too casually, when I was bringing Colin around again, because she wanted to get to know his parents better. Translation: she wanted to network her way into their circle. My sister made jokes about me landing a rich boy and how I better lock that down before he figures out he can do better. It should have disgusted me more than it did. But when you grow up in scarcity, you get used to people making everything transactional, even love. Still, Colin and I were good, or at least I thought we were. We had routines that felt safe. I'd wake up early and have coffee ready when he dragged himself into the kitchen. We meal prepped on Sundays. We had a comfortable rhythm where we could exist in the same space without constantly demanding entertainment from each other. He'd watch reality TV while I read market reports. We'd have lazy Saturdays where we stayed in bed until noon, ordered takeout, and talked about random things: work gossip, dumb internet drama, dreams we never said out loud. To me, that was intimacy. To me, that was grown-up love. What I didn't know was Colin had been complaining to his friend group that our relationship was too predictable. And his friends were exactly the wrong people to say that to. Their names were Amber, Tessa, and Morgan. 3 single women who seemed to treat relationships like battlefield strategy. The type who could turn brunch into a forensic investigation. If he texted back in 2 hours instead of 1, it means he's losing interest. Amber had just crawled out of a 2-year relationship where the guy had been cheating for 6 months. She found out through Instagram when the other woman posted a photo wearing Amber's boyfriend's college sweatshirt. Tessa was in the middle of a messy divorce. Her ex-husband cleaned out their savings and disappeared to another state with his secretary. Morgan. Morgan was the kind of person who couldn't keep a relationship longer than a few months, because the moment things got calm, she got bored and burned it down just to feel something. They were bitter, hurt, constantly talking about men like men were puzzles that existed to be solved and controlled. And they couldn't stand watching Colin in something stable when their lives were chaos. So they started filling his head with ideas. They told him that comfortable relationships were relationship death, that a woman like me, focused, career-driven, steady, would take him for granted, that he needed to create urgency if he wanted me to step up and prove I was committed. Looking back, there were signs I missed. Colin started making comments that didn't sound like him, little phrases that felt rehearsed. Our weekends are kind of routine, don't you think? Do you ever miss the excitement of being single? Sometimes passion matters more than peace. He'd see couples arguing in restaurants and say weird things like, "At least they're passionate," or, "I wonder what it's like to have that kind of intensity." At the time, I thought he was just thinking, normal relationship thoughts. Everyone wonders sometimes if they're missing out on something. But it wasn't random curiosity, it was programming. Those women were convincing him that if I really loved him, I'd need to be tested. And the sick part, I wasn't even dragging my feet on commitment. If Colin had sat down and said, "Bridget, I want to talk about our future. I want engagement. I want marriage someday," I would have listened. I would have had the conversation. I would have met him there like a partner. Instead, he let people who didn't know our relationship shape his idea of what love was supposed to feel like. About 2 months before everything blew up, he shifted again, subtler but sharper. He started talking about missing out on his 20s, about how his single friends were out at bars, concerts, spontaneous trips. He'd scroll through their photos with this distant look, like he was watching a movie where he used to be the main character. He started following Instagram accounts about living your best life and embracing independence. He'd send me articles about quarter-life crises and ask if I ever worried we were missing out on important experiences. At first, I assumed he was stressed. His job had been uncertain, restructuring rumors, quiet layoffs. I tried to be supportive. I told him if he lost his job, we could cut expenses, move somewhere cheaper. I even offered to help him update his resume, connect him with people I knew. But then the comments got pointed. I wonder what it would be like to be on my own again. Sometimes I feel like I settled down too young. I've never really lived independently. It confused me, because he had been the one who pushed for us to move in together. He had been the one talking about our place, our future, our next steps. He'd even joked about what our kids might look like someday. Now he was acting like we were a mistake he hadn't meant to make. For 2 weeks, everything felt like walking on glass. He'd pick fights over stupid things, going to the same grocery store, eating the same meals, having predictable date nights. He complained we never did anything spontaneous, while also shooting down every spontaneous idea I offered because he was tired or busy or meeting the girls. And then one evening, after dinner, he sat down on our couch, the one we'd picked out together 6 months earlier, and his voice changed. Not angry, not cold, carefully soft, like he'd practiced. He started crying. Real tears. Not dramatic, not theatrical, just enough to make my chest tighten and my instincts kick in. He told me he'd been doing a lot of thinking, that he loved me, that I was an amazing woman, but he wasn't sure if he was ready for something this serious. I remember the way my body went still, like it was bracing for impact. Then he said the words that made the room tilt. "I think we should take a break." Not a breakup, he rushed to clarify. A break. A month-long separation. No seeing each other. Minimal contact, just space, so he could figure out what he wanted and reconnect with himself. He said it the way people say something they want you to accept without arguing. He said it like it was mature, reasonable, planned. And the worst part? For a split second, I almost believed him. I remember nodding while my heart was breaking. That's the detail people never talk about. The way your body can betray you when you're trying to be understanding. My head was spinning. My chest felt hollow, and still I was sitting there, nodding like this was a reasonable request instead of an emotional demolition. Colin kept talking, his voice low and careful. He said this break wasn't about wanting to see other people. He emphasized that more than once. Said it was about growth, perspective, making sure we were choosing each other for the right reasons, not just because it was easy. If we're really meant to be, he said, brushing his thumb across his cheek to wipe away tears, a month apart will only make us stronger. A month! He had already thought it through. He'd looked into studio apartments. He knew exactly how we'd split bills during the break. He even framed it like he was doing us a favor, saving us from waking up 10 years later full of regret. Every word felt rehearsed. But when someone you love is crying and telling you they're confused about their life, you don't interrogate the script. You try to help them finish the scene. So I swallowed my instincts. I told him I understood. I told him I respected his need for space. I even offered to be the one to move out temporarily so he wouldn't have to scramble financially. That should have been my first clue, how easily he accepted that. Within 2 days, I had packed a suitcase and moved into my friend Jake's spare bedroom. I paid him $650 for the month. Meanwhile, I continued covering my share of the rent at the apartment Colin and I shared because the idea of leaving him in a bind made my stomach twist with guilt. Jake didn't say much at first. He let me settle in, let me cry in private, let me pretend I was fine. But I could feel his skepticism sitting in the room with us. Every now and then, he'd say something mild but sharp. Kind of convenient timing for a life crisis, huh? Or, she seems very active on social media for someone soul-searching. I brushed him off. I wasn't ready to hear it. My family, on the other hand, heard everything and somehow managed to make it worse. When I told my mom that Colin and I were taking a break, she panicked instantly. "You better fix this," she said, not even bothering to ask how I was holding up. "Men don't wait around forever. What if he finds someone better, someone younger?" I remember staring at my phone afterward, stunned by how fast my pain became her problem, only because it threatened her access to comfort. My dad's advice was to buy Colin something expensive. "Men like gestures," he said. "Show him what he's worth." Brittany was even more direct. "So, does this mean you can't help me with my car payment this month?" Then, without missing a beat, she added, "Maybe you should just propose, lock him down." None of them asked if I was okay. They were just worried about losing what they thought he represented. Work became hell. I'm usually sharp, focused, efficient, composed. But during those weeks, my mind was a fog. I missed calls, double-booked appointments, zoned out during client meetings. I'd be walking someone through a property and suddenly realize I hadn't heard the last 3 sentences they'd said. My boss pulled me aside after I messed up paperwork on a major lease. "Everything okay at home?" he asked gently. I hated that question. In my industry, stability is currency. Clients don't want to trust someone whose personal life is visibly unraveling. I admitted I was dealing with relationship issues, and he nodded, understanding, but warned me I needed to pull it together before it started affecting my reputation. Meanwhile, Colin seemed to be thriving. His social media was the highlight reel of everything I wasn't. Photos out with Amber, Tessa, and Morgan at trendy brunch spots I'd never heard of. Smiling at art galleries, laughing at concerts, doing pottery classes, yoga in the park. Captions about rediscovering myself and embracing independence. He looked light, free, untouched. And every time I saw one of those posts, it felt like swallowing glass. The worst part wasn't the distance, it was the mixed signals. Every few days he'd text me something soft and nostalgic. "I miss the way you make coffee in the morning." I was thinking about that trip we took to Colorado. Then, hours later, he'd post another photo of himself out somewhere new, glowing like someone who'd escaped something terrible. The whiplash was brutal. I started losing weight because I couldn't eat. Food tasted like cardboard. I forgot meals entirely. I dropped nearly 15 pounds in 3 weeks, and Jake started making sure I ate at least 1 real meal a day, sliding plates in front of me like I was recovering from an illness. I became obsessed with his online presence. I analyzed every caption, every emoji, every comment. If he posted something about independence, I convinced myself he was done with me. If he sent a nostalgic text, I let myself hope. I knew, logically, that someone who genuinely needed space probably wouldn't be posting constantly or going out every night. But love makes excuses faster than logic can object. By the 3rd week, I was exhausted, emotionally numb, physically drained. I'd started browsing apartment listings for when my month at Jake's was up, trying to picture a version of my life that didn't include Colin. I was beginning to accept that maybe this was over, and that was exactly when the truth came looking for me. It happened on a Saturday night, just after 11 p.m. My phone rang. The caller ID said Amber. My first thought wasn't suspicion, it was fear. I answered immediately, my heart pounding, already bracing for bad news. Her voice was shaky, like she'd been crying for hours. "Bridget," she said, barely above a whisper, "I'm so sorry. I need to tell you something, and you deserve to know." In that moment, I thought Colin was hurt, or sick, or in trouble. I had no idea she was about to tell me that the last 3 weeks of my life hadn't been a crisis. They'd been a plan. I sat up so fast I made myself dizzy. "What's wrong?" I asked. "Is Colin okay?" There was a pause on the line, too long, too heavy. I could hear Amber's breathing, uneven and wet, like she was trying not to fall apart completely. "He's fine," she said. That's the problem." My stomach dropped. She started apologizing before she even explained. Over and over. Like if she said it enough times, it might undo what she was about to confess. "Bridget, I can't sleep. I haven't slept in days. What we did to you, what I didn't think it would go this far." I remember gripping my phone so hard my hand cramped. "Amber," I said slowly, carefully, "what are you talking about?" And then she told me, not gently, not all at once. It came out in a rush, like she was afraid if she paused, she'd lose the nerve. The break wasn't real. The crisis wasn't real. Colin wasn't confused. It had all been staged, planned, discussed, scripted. My mind rejected the words before they could land. I actually laughed at first, a short, broken sound. "That's not funny," I said. "If this is some kind of joke." "It's not," she cut in, her voice cracking. "I swear to you, it's not." She told me everything. How Colin had complained that our relationship felt too comfortable. How he'd said he was scared I was settling, that I might never feel urgency to commit. How she, Tessa, and Morgan had convinced him that men needed pressure, that women needed to create scarcity. They framed it like strategy, like psychology, like science. They'd shown him articles about commitment and male behavior, stories about couples where women staged breakups or jealousy tests and ended up with rings on their fingers. They told him comfort was dangerous. That stability made people lazy. So they came up with a plan. A fake breakup crisis designed to scare me into proving my commitment. They planned the timing around our lease renewal. They coached him on what to say, what doubts to express, how emotional to get. They planned his social media posts, when to look happy, when to post nostalgia, when to go quiet. Amber told me they monitored my reactions, my likes, my views, whether I posted sad quotes or stayed silent. When I seemed like I was accepting the breakup, Colin would send a nostalgic text to reel me back in. When I seemed hopeful, he'd post something about independence to make me panic again. They adjusted his behavior based on me, like I was data. At one point, she admitted, they made bets about which tactics would work best. I felt sick. Amber's voice dropped even lower. We thought it was fascinating how predictable it was, how easy it was to keep you in that anxious space. I couldn't breathe. Every sleepless night. Every meal I couldn't swallow. Every moment I'd questioned my worth. All of it had been manufactured. They were going to end it at exactly 1 month, Amber said. Colin would come back, say he realized he couldn't live without you, and you were supposed to propose, or at least talk about it seriously. That was the end game. I hung up on her without saying goodbye. I sat in Jake's living room for almost 2 hours without moving. My phone lay on the coffee table like it had personally betrayed me. I replayed the last 3 weeks in my head with new eyes. The tears, the speeches, the carefully chosen words. It hadn't been confusion. It had been performance. The next evening, Colin showed up at Jake's place unannounced. He brought homemade cookies. He looked concerned, soft, loving. I knew, before he even opened his mouth, that this was supposed to be the next phase. I didn't let him sit down. "What did you tell Amber?" I asked. His face froze. For half a second, the mask slipped. Then he tried to laugh it off. "What? Nothing." "Why?" So I told him. Everything Amber had said. The planning, the monitoring, the scripts, the bets. I repeated phrases he'd never told me. Phrases he'd only typed in a group chat. His color drained. He tried to deny it at first. Stammered. Claimed Amber was lying. Jealous. Drunk. Then I quoted him back to himself. Word for word. That's when he broke. He started crying, harder than I'd ever seen him cry. He sank onto Jake's couch and buried his face in his hands. "I didn't think it would hurt you like this," he said. "It was supposed to help us." Help us. He said it started as a simple push toward engagement, that his friends convinced him it was harmless, that everyone does tests in relationships, that he never meant for it to go on so long. He called it girl talk that got out of hand. I stared at him, numb. He said watching me suffer had been harder than he expected, that he'd wanted to call it off sooner, that the break made him realize how much he loved me. And then, like he couldn't help himself, he tried to turn it around. "If you really loved me," he said quietly, "you'd be able to forgive one mistake. Your reaction kind of proves what they said, that you don't really understand my emotional needs." Something inside me snapped. I told him the truth. That instead of making me want to commit, he'd made sure I never could. That I couldn't build a life with someone who thought emotional torture was an acceptable strategy. That the worst part wasn't the lie, it was watching me fall apart while knowing it was fake. Every tear he'd shed had been rehearsed. Every moment of vulnerability had been calculated. I told him love doesn't involve breaking someone down to see how much they'll beg. I told him he'd gotten his wish for space, permanently. And for the first time since this started, I felt something solid beneath my feet. Not relief, not joy, but certainty. The silence afterward was louder than any argument we'd ever had. Colin stayed on Jake's couch for a long time after I told him it was over. He cried, he apologized, he tried to bargain. Promised therapy, promised to cut off Amber, Tessa, and Morgan, promised he'd never test me again. I listened without reacting. Because once you see someone clearly, you can't unsee them. I didn't scream. I didn't insult him. I didn't need to. The truth had already done the damage. I told him calmly that trust wasn't cracked. It was gone. And I wasn't willing to live the rest of my life wondering whether every future problem was real or just another experiment. When he finally left, I locked the door and slid down against it, shaking. But I didn't go after him. That was the moment something in me changed. Within 2 weeks, I found my own apartment, a quiet one-bedroom on the other side of town, $1,900 a month. No shared memories, no ghosts of us arguing over paint colors or furniture catalogs. Starting fresh felt like stepping into clean air after months underwater. Colin didn't handle the breakup well. He called, texted, showed up at my office once until security escorted him out. His mother left me voicemails about how he was just a boy who made a mistake. The apple, as they say, didn't fall far from the tree. I blocked them all. I threw myself into work with a focus I didn't know I still had. Deals that once felt stressful became simple. Negotiations sharpened me instead of draining me. Somewhere along the way, I realized that being manipulated had taught me something dangerous: how to read people. I started thinking bigger. 6 months later, I opened my own firm, Wilson Commercial Properties. The first year was brutal. Long hours, lean months. I made about $73,000, less than I had before, but it was mine. Year 2, I hit $140,000. Year 3, $180,000, with 2 agents working under me. And then things really took off. While I was building something real, Colin's life unraveled. He lost his marketing job during a round of layoffs and struggled to find anything stable. He moved back in with his parents. From what I heard through mutual contacts, the friend group that had orchestrated everything imploded in spectacular fashion. They blamed each other. Amber felt guilty. Tessa felt justified. Morgan claimed the plan would have worked if Colin hadn't gotten weak. I didn't care. I was too busy living. By the time 2 years had passed, my life barely resembled the one I'd had during that fake break. My income had climbed to nearly $280,000 a year. I had a team of 5 agents. I bought a house in a quiet neighborhood for $340,000 and drove a BMW, not flashy, just enough to remind myself how far I'd come. More importantly, I was happy. I was dating again, but carefully, intentionally. And eventually, I met someone who felt nothing like chaos. Daniel was steady without being dull, confident without needing control. He listened. He communicated. He never made me feel like I had to perform to earn his commitment. That was when I understood what real safety felt like. And then the messages started. It began with a LinkedIn notification. Colin. He congratulated me on my success, said he'd always believed in me, said he was proud. I didn't respond, so he escalated. Emails, longer ones, emotional ones. Apologies wrapped in praise and nostalgia. He said he'd grown, learned, regretted everything. Then the truth slipped out. He needed a job. Any job. The woman he'd psychologically tortured for entertainment was now his last hope for stability. He asked if I could give him a position, administrative, entry-level, anything. And he wasn't the only one. Amber messaged me asking if I needed freelance marketing help. Tessa asked about administrative openings with benefits. Morgan, somehow, had the audacity to flirt, suggesting we grab a drink sometime. The desperation was almost surreal. People who once treated my pain like a game now wanted access to the life I'd built. And for the first time, I was in control. I didn't rush my response. That was the power I'd earned, the ability to pause without fear. 2 years earlier, a delayed text from Colin could unravel my entire day. Now, his emails sat unread while I focused on closings. contracts, and people who actually deserved my energy. When I finally replied, it was professional, clean, unemotional. I thanked him for reaching out. I acknowledged his interest in Wilson Commercial Properties, and then I explained, clearly, that given our history, it wouldn't be appropriate to work together. I wished him luck and suggested he explore other opportunities in the area. No opening, no invitation to negotiate, no kindness he could twist into hope. To Amber, Tessa, and Morgan, I didn't respond at all. They didn't deserve closure. Closure is for people who respect boundaries, not those who confuse access with entitlement. Word traveled fast. People talk when things don't go the way they expect, especially when they assume someone would fold. I heard through mutual circles that Colin hadn't taken my refusal well, that he'd convinced himself I owed him something, that he couldn't understand how I could be so calm after everything we'd been through. But that was the difference. We hadn't been through something together. I'd been through something because of him. My family tried their luck next. Once news spread about my business success, the calls started coming again. Casual at first, then insistent. My mom suggested I forgive Colin because successful women need stable men. My dad pitched another half-baked investment idea. Brittany asked if I could co-sign a loan just until things got better. I said no. Not angrily, not defensively, just no. I told them that if they wanted a relationship with me, it needed to be based on respect, not convenience. That my success didn't make me their safety net, and that I was done confusing obligation with love. Some of them didn't take it well, but peace doesn't require permission. The last update I heard, months later, came from someone who thought it would amuse me. Colin was still living with his parents, bouncing between temporary jobs. Amber had moved back to her hometown and was working at her uncle's insurance office. Tessa was stuck at a call center, posting angry rants about how unfair life was. Morgan was dating someone who treated her poorly but had money, putting up with emotional abuse for financial security. The irony didn't escape me, but it didn't satisfy me either, because the real victory wasn't watching them struggle. It was waking up every morning without anxiety in my chest. It was building something without manipulation. It was loving someone who never needed to scare me to keep me. What they taught me, without meaning to, was this. Anyone who needs to break you to prove you care was never worthy of your commitment. I didn't lose a relationship. I escaped a test I was never supposed to pass.